Russian general that has been assassinated in Moscow. Why wasn't security beefed up? How vital was this particular general? What's this chemical warfare that everybody is talking about, even as North NATO members are currently in a huddle and Donald Trump is targeting Joe Biden on that front? But that's not all. We're going to take you to Vanuatu as well, a 7.4 magnitude earthquake. But what's more is that India-China border talks are right there on the cards. After 5 years, Wang Yi and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval are going to be face to face. All that is coming your way, but before that, the top headlines on Global Lens first. Ukraine kills top Russian General Igor Kirillov, chief of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops, outside an apartment building in Moscow. Magnitude 7.4 earthquake hits Vanuatu. After Cyclone Chido's aftermath, Mayotte authorities fear hunger and disease. Race to help the cyclone survivors underway. India's NSA Ajit Doval is in Beijing ahead of India-China special representative talks amid the recent thaw over border dispute and the disengagement. Wang Yi and Doval face to face after 5 years. Three dead in Wisconsin Christian school shooting, including teen suspect. Shooter has been killed. They killed the teacher and a teenage student, with 6 others critically wounded. President-elect Donald Trump loses bid to toss and scrap the hush money conviction on immunity grounds. We'll tell you all about it. Stay tuned. Problems for Trudeau surmount. The Canadian government is adrift after Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister resigns and steps down. All of this amid Donald Trump's tariff threats. In the West Asian sector, Israeli Defense Minister says Israel will have freedom of action in Gaza after defeating Hamas. Meta has been fined $253 million over Facebook hacks. This by Ireland. Meanwhile, a big headline coming in from Manipur, where a mortar was found nearly 1.5 kilometers away from Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh's private residence in Imphal East. Security forces were quick to mobilize and defuse the device. But first up, ladies and gentlemen, shifting our focus to what transpired in Moscow's residential area today. A top Russian general that has been assassinated in Ukraine has now come out and taken responsibility. Let's lay down the semantics for all the viewers out there. Russian general heading the country's nuclear, biological, chemical defense forces and his assistant were killed in a bomb blast. Russia's Federal Investigating Agency said the high-ranking general was killed when a device hidden in a scooter exploded as he was leaving a residential block. The device was detonated remotely as per the officials. Now, visuals from the ground showed a shattered entrance to a building littered with rubble and 2 bodies lying in the blood-stained snow. A criminal case has been filed after this particular blast episode. The top-rank officer, Igor Kirillov, was killed just a day after Ukraine accused him of using chemical weapons against Ukrainian troops. An SBU source has now confirmed that Ukrainian intelligence agency had been behind this particular hit. The agency said that the security service of Ukraine killed Russian General Igor Kirillov in a special operation in Moscow. Now, everybody's reacted to that, but it's going to be important to take a look at how Kremlin has reacted to it. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, said that the Ukrainian leadership would face imminent revenge for this hit. A witness, however, said that there was no security at the residential block where this blast was occurred. Take a look at what the witness had to say.
I only knew him from the media. I had no idea where he lived in our block. I saw him on the TV only. We knew his car though because we saw it. They use the electric scooter, and there's a scooter parking there, near the entrance. So who knew? At the moment, you see a lot of police, but usually everything is open. Anybody can go in and out.
Well, even the local resident over there said, I did not know who the man was. I just saw them on the media. Let's talk about Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov a little bit, who was the chief of Russia's Radiation, Chemical and Biological Protection Troops and a senior member of the Kremlin. He led specialized troops responsible for handling radioactive, chemical and biological contamination scenarios. And he was accused of using barbaric chemical weapons in Ukraine, including toxic choking agents like chloropicrin. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, to speak more on this, I've got Major General Sanjay Mestan, Defense and Strategic Expert. General, a very warm welcome to you. Always a pleasure to have you with us, especially when we're talking about Ukraine and Russia, given the fact that Donald Trump is soon going to be assuming his responsibilities in the Oval Office. And these last-ditch efforts that we've been seeing by Russia and Ukraine both, it's all because, well, Donald Trump is going to be dancing his way to the Oval Office. First and foremost, you've been reading the media reports today as well, a remotely detonated scooter, lack of security. But let's talk about the man himself. How big of a blow is this to Russia? Is this an embarrassing situation given Ukrainian forces have now claimed responsibility carrying out this attack in Moscow?
Yeah, definitely, Kabir. It's a big blow to Russia. And firstly, regarding the General Igor Kirillov, see, he was heading the radiation, chemical and biological aspects, especially the protection units. So he had a major role, and he is a senior most general till date after the Russia-Ukraine conflict who has been assassinated. And as on date, I think Ukraine has carried out a total of about 5 assassinations. You are aware that in November, one of the admirals who was heading a fleet in Crimea, he was killed. Thereafter, in Moscow itself, there have been 2 blasts. One was in the cafe, and one that girl was killed, who was the son of a die-hard, nationalist there. So many, and of course, one very senior officer was killed. So 5-6 assassinations have taken place in Moscow and also in other parts of Russia and Crimea. So what this shows is that importance of this man. Yes, he is the senior most, and he has been alleged using chemical weapons in this war. And the Ukrainians have stated that about 4,300 times he has used some of the chemical weapons, which have got long-term implications. Short-term implication is presumably one of the grenades was K1 combat grenades. Now this grenade, if you lob it in a trench, in a trench for an infantry soldier, it gives a lot of protection. But once this kind of a grenade is lobbed, it has these chemicals which are coming out, and these have an impact on the person, so they have a tendency to come out because they want to breathe fresh air. And that is the time the snipers, the Russian snipers or the drones would kill these Ukrainian soldiers.
Like so a real vital general for the Russian forces, isn't it? I mean, General, I'm putting this question to you. General Kirillov seemed to be a real vital resource for the Russian forces. I'm going to take this question ahead, but General Mestan, do stay on with us. Let's take a look at this report that's been filed by Reuters in terms of where this bomb was planted, what happened before it, why wasn't security beefed up? Take a look.
Ukraine assassinated a top Russian general it accused of chemical weapons crimes in Moscow on Tuesday morning. A source from Ukraine's SBU has confirmed the intelligence service was responsible. It marks the most high-profile killing of its kind. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, who was chief of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops, was killed outside an apartment building when a bomb hidden in an electric scooter went off. That's according to Russia's investigative committee, which investigates serious crimes, adding that his assistant also died in the blast. A local resident was near the explosion.
At first we thought that cement might have been unloaded or something similar, but the blast was so loud that it did not seem like construction works. It was very scary.
Kirillov is the most senior Russian military officer to be assassinated inside Russia by Ukraine. Russia's state RIA news agency cited former President Dmitry Medvedev, saying Ukraine now faces imminent revenge. Investigators said they had opened a criminal case into the murder of 2 servicemen. Law enforcement sources told Russian media a terrorism case was likely to be opened.
Well, to the viewers and General Meston as well, do pay heed. We've got President-elect Donald Trump, who suggested that he may reverse Joe Biden's recent decision to allow Ukrainian forces to use the American long-range weapons, the attacker missiles, into Russia. Trump called the decision by Biden, quote-unquote, stupid, and is even considering reversing the decision. We'll let that code graphic play out for all the viewers as well. But General Meston, taking a look at the chemical warfare, taking a look at how long this war has panned out, there was no security at this particular residential site where this so-called top-ranking official was inside. Why was there no security given the rank of the officer? And now that Dmitry Medvedev has said that there's going to be hefty retaliation, what do you think is coming Ukraine's way next?
Yeah, firstly, coming on to the security, firstly, it is in Moscow. It's about 7 kilometers away from southeast of Kremlin. So what it proves is, that many senior officers who are based in Moscow. Now, every officer definitely cannot be given security. Yes, he was heading this radiological and chemical and biological protection troops. So his portfolio was very, very important. And the fact of the matter is that he was staying in a residential apartment, and even people were not aware who this gentleman was. So perhaps that was also one of the inherent securities that no one was aware that this top general was staying. But what it shows is that his importance was there. Security, of course, cannot be catered to, but yes, now I think President Putin will have to identify these so-called targets, strategic targets, and I think security will be given. But now coming on to what Russia can do, I think Russia will do is one thing is very clear, the intensity of operations in terms of missiles and aircrafts, that will continue. Number of drones launched will be increased, but I don't see much increase, except that yes, they can also now try to resort to some kind of political assassination. President Zelensky may not be on the target because 5 to 6 successful assassinations in Russia by the SBU group has been quite creditable. And this is also sending a message to the Russian president that his vulnerability of his top people in command control structure remains. So that is also sending a strong message. On the battlefield, Ukrainians do not have the resources to combat and stop them, especially in the Donetsk region. So therefore, this is an easy option to start targeting the strategic targets in the heart of Russia. And the advantage is that they have a special Alpha group, special forces, which is allotted to this SBU group. So I'm quite sure some of the elements have gone. They have deeply penetrated. Their surveillance and penetration has been very good. The fact that they were aware about the routine, the timing, and at particular time when he was coming out to place this electric scooter is, I think, quite creditable. So it is definitely a matter of concern for President Putin. Accountability may not be there because, there's no democracy there. So this may not be discussed. But yes, it's a strong message for protection for the top strategic assets of Russia. Now, they will definitely retaliate by intensities, I think, only through the missiles, rockets, and drones and air warfare. Beyond that, I think some kind of a political assassination also may be planned to send a message to Ukraine that it's not only in terms of missiles, etc. We can also do some kind of assassination. But to a lot of extent, Russia has been surprised. This has happened. The Kursk is itself, infiltration by the Ukrainians in Kursk. So that means it is emboldening Ukraine to take some bold steps. So this, I would say, is a very, very bold step to go and hit the topmost, one of the topmost generals in Moscow is, I think, quite creditable. So, and this is again happening because he was accused of using chemical weapons against the troops. So they considered it as a legitimate strategic target. And that is what they have achieved. And I think both these sides are now trying to pressurize each other because each side knows that the war is going to end shortly. President Trump has clearly stated. So therefore, everyone is now going to pressurize each side. The biggest pressure on Ukraine today is the loss of territory, which each day the Russians are making inroads into their territorial gains. But however, the Kursk remains an issue. And of course, the targeting of these strategic assets, top generals and maybe top
pertinent points, General, that you've raised over here. not just a target on Zelensky himself, but now Putin's got his own job to carry out and make this list of all the important people that could be potential targets as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see that given Ukrainian retaliation, what kind of a conflict escalation are we looking at, and how will Russia now finally respond to it? Major General Sanjay Mestan, defense and strategic expert, always a pleasure to have you with us. Many thanks for joining with us and helping us out with your insightful inputs. Well, like I mentioned, it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen on this front over here. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, we also need to talk about Ajit Doval, who is in Beijing at this particular moment in time. And even as we're looking at border talks with Wang Yi and Ajit Doval being face-to-face after 5 years, it's going to be very interesting to see what pans out in Beijing. In a significant step towards resolving this long-standing border issues, NSA Ajit Doval, he is in Beijing for this high-level meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and the visit follows recent positive developments in India-China relations, especially after the easing of tensions along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. The upcoming special representative SR-level talks is what they're calling it. The first such meeting after 5 years aims to resolve the border disputes that have been a source of friction between the two countries for decades. Now, the timing of Doval's visit follows a gradual improvement in the bilateral ties as well, particularly since the Galwan 2020 clash, which led to heightened military standoffs between India and Chinese forces. But then again, one notable development was the disengagement agreement on the LAC, announced after a meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the BRICS summit, which took place in Russia. And given the history of the border tensions dating back to the 1962 conflict, this special representative talks, they aim to build a deeper understanding of the issues at hand and explore avenues for peaceful resolution. While there is no official confirmation yet on the exact agenda of the talks, sources suggest that the discussions will cover a range of sensitive issues. Additionally, the meeting could potentially lead to further military-to-military discussions to ensure the proper implementation of any agreements that have been made. And with China's increasing geopolitical tensions with the United States over the issues like Taiwan and the Philippines, Beijing has shown a renewed interest in stabilizing its relationships with India. Joining me on the broadcast is Professor Swaran Singh at the Center for International Politics, JNU. Very warm welcome to you, Professor. Professor, first and foremost, 5 years later, Wang Yi and Ajit Doval face-to-face. This is after sweets were exchanged during the disengagement process amidst the Diwali. We've seen Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi sit across the table at the BRICS summit as well. Things certainly, at least in terms of optics, looking quite happy. 5 years later, Wang Yi, Ajit Doval face to face. What are you expecting? What are those sensitive issues that need to be highlighted?
First of all, Kavir, if you look at the hectic pace of senior level interactions, this is definitely way beyond just optics, and the mood is very clear. From October 21st, the last agreement on Demchok and Depsang in terms of patrolling and demilitarization, the immediate within 2 days meeting of two national leaders in Kazan, then December 5th delegation level meeting of two foreign ministers in Rio de Janeiro, then followed by the working group meeting on consultation and coordination on border affairs between two ministries in Delhi, which was the 32nd round of dialogue, and now the senior level special representatives. I think it's an impressive pace of very high level and dedicated conversations, which has also been able to showcase what is the agenda that they have had. Very clearly, there's quite a number of issues on the table. But now we have this special representatives meeting, which is the senior most level two functionaries from India and China sitting together. And this mechanism was built primarily to ensure or manage is the new language now, peace and tranquility on the border, and seek some kind of confidence building and finally resolution. So therefore, I think we are a kind of full circle with the special representatives coming back and having a conversation. The two, of course, had met in St. Petersburg as part of BRICS National Security Advisors meeting, but that was not special representatives format at that time. Now the conversation in Beijing is clearly focused on border, the issues that we are already hearing. I think from the Indian side, the focus remains much more border-centric. You remember, we have always said relations cannot be normal as long as borders are not normal. So therefore, India is not just ensuring, understanding on patrolling on the line of actual control and de-escalation to take it forward, but also at the same time, India today is talking of restarting the pilgrimage to Mansarovar and Kailash, and also revival of sharing of hydrological data on the Sangpo Brahmaputra river. Chinese apparently have always said that one issue should not be made to hold hostage entire relationship. So their spectrum of priorities is slightly broad-based. They want to ensure that visa regimes are relaxed for general Chinese. Journalists are allowed to come to India. All the flights are sort of revived. You used to have direct connection to 5 Chinese cities. So slightly, I think the focus of priority is different, but I think overall mood is very upswing in that sense of taking relations.
Professor, well, if you are saying the mood is upswing, and given the disengagement at LAC, what are some of the biggest challenges between these two countries at the moment?
I think challenges are very clear because these two nations over last 30 years or so had evolved about a dozen MOUs, agreements, and mechanisms of all kinds to ensure peace and tranquility on the border. Likewise, had also created a range of mechanisms from the flag level meetings on the border to all the way to senior special representatives level meetings. So the kind of arrangements are in place. What, of course, China and India have transformed in last 30 years very rapidly. So in all sectors, there is a transformation, including, for example, on the frontiers of China and India in that sense, which makes mobility much more easier. So both sides, and I would say Chinese particularly, are able to bring forward much heavier equipment, quasi-permanent structures, large number of soldiers, much faster forward, which has resulted in simply what we call ingressions or incursions annually going up from about 80-90 to nearly 200 by the time President Xi Jinping came to power. And in last 10 years, we have seen it going all the way to 600. So more incursions, more encounters, more face-offs create new set of anxieties, and therefore, as Foreign Minister has said many times, we need to restart a new set of confidence building measures because China and India are no longer the same as we were in 1990. So I think that is the new approach now to, again,
this
how
new
to find
approach,
new
Professor,
ways
that you
to
talk about, this new approach, this new prism with which China now needs to look at India. I remember at that meeting in Kazan as well, Xi Jinping used the words voice of the global south, something that the Prime Minister coined himself, at the G20 meet here at the Bharat Mandapam in India, in New Delhi. Now, in the last 30 years that you're talking about as well, how important is it that one understands how China views India's current position in the geopolitics, let alone the global south, but on the entire world stage? Do you think there's a problem over there with what China shows in terms of its visible teeth and teeth that are hidden?
There is no doubt, Kavir, China has much larger GDP, as we all know, 5 to 6 times. It has a very large, expensive Belt and Road Initiative. So it has its own set of leverages. But India has the enormous advantage of great acceptability around the world. The kind of engagement that the world, particularly great powers like European nations, United States, and emerging powers, and of course now the global south, the way India is engaged around the world brings enormous goodwill to India in that sense. And I think Chinese very clearly over a period of time begin to recognize that India may not be comparable to, being the largest trading nation as China is, or having about nearly $2 trillion of investments that China now has in about 150 countries. But India's access, India's approach, India's engagement, the way India is welcome. For example, look at Indian Prime Minister visiting whether the Western Pacific Islands. You remember his visit to Papua New Guinea. More recently, his visit, for example, to the Caribbean. Guyana was another example. So the way Indian leadership is able to engage with many of these countries and emerging as a voice of global south is being recognized by Chinese. So China and India are no longer the same, I'm saying, as they were in 1990s when they conceptualized how to maintain peace and tranquility on the border. And now they are very different countries in that sense, and both recognize the change, except that they have to gear up and set up new mechanisms, new ways, new mannerisms of dealing with each other. And I think here is a quick example. If you look at the immediate kind of concern the Chinese have, is the fact that President Donald Trump, after he takes over power in White House on 20th of January, his first foreign visit is likely to be to India, because India is going to host Quad, and President Donald Trump will be coming to attend the Quad summit, and Chinese are trying to make sure that they can resolve things with India possibly before that visit takes place.
US influence and US pressure is certainly something, Professor, that one will, of course, have to look at. And that's, again, a pertinent point that you've raised, that the Quad Summit is going to be hosted by India next. And America, a great partner on that particular front. Donald Trump will have to make his way here. And every time a US president is in the Indo-Pacific, I know things aren't really calm in Beijing. But new optics, new enthusiasm, you're talking about a new slate to begin with, but then again, how will this hold ground in front of old habits, old players, and in old ways between these two countries? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Professor Swaran Singh, many thanks for joining with us and helping us out with your insightful inputs on this point. Ajit Doval face to face with Wang Yi after 5 years. That special representative talks right there on the cards. All right then, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be shifting our focus here, talking about Justin Trudeau as well. Is he cornered in his own party? All of this happening ahead of polls. His key ally, Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of Canada, stepping down today as well. Canada's Finance Minister, Chrystia Freelander, she quit on Monday after clashing with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on issues including how to handle possible US tariffs, dealing another blow to an already unpopular government under Justin Trudeau. And following the unexpected resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing significant pressures to now resign himself. In a letter of resignation, Ms. Freeland accused Justin Trudeau, who is deeply unpopular at home, of engaging in costly political gimmicks instead of focusing on countering the grave threats of tariffs. She said that the breakdown with Mr. Trudeau came over his push for measures including a sales tax holiday and sending modest checks to taxpayers that would add to the government's deficit, which is already quite surmountable. Here's a complete report. We've got a panelist waiting for us, but before that, take a look at this report.
Canada's finance minister quit on Monday, dealing another major political blow to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's already unpopular government. Chrystia Freeland said in a stinging resignation letter that she was quitting in the wake of a meeting last Friday with Trudeau, who had asked her to take on a lesser post after the two had argued for weeks over spending. In a letter posted to social media, Freeland said the possibility of new U.S. tariffs represented a grave threat. She wrote, "That means keeping our fiscal powder dry today, so we have the reserves we may need for a tariff war. That means eschewing costly political gimmicks, which we can ill afford." Her resignation came just hours before she was due to present an economic update to Parliament. That update showed Canada's fiscal deficit for 2023-2024 came in at over $43 billion, more than half of what was projected last year. Freeland also served as Deputy Prime Minister, and her resignation leaves Trudeau without a key ally in cabinet at a critical juncture. She joins a wave of cabinet ministers who have either already quit or announced they won't run in the next election. Approval ratings indicate Trudeau would lose badly to the opposition Conservatives in the next election, which must be held before the end of October 2025. Dominic LeBlanc, the public safety minister and a member of Trudeau's inner circle, was sworn in as the new finance minister later on Monday. Before entering politics in 2013, Freeland worked as a journalist and in senior editorial roles with several media companies, including the Financial Times, the Globe and Mail, and Reuters News, where she worked from 2010 to 2013.
Rabinder Sachdev, foreign affairs expert with a keen focus on Canada and United States, with us on the broadcast. Mr. Sachdev, first and foremost to you, what are the political ramifications of somebody like Chrystia Freeland, stepping down, not just from a role of the finance minister, which was her actual issue with Justin Trudeau, given the tariff threats with Donald Trump, but also how crucial is this entire tariff threat issue for Justin Trudeau? We're looking at the border migration also being one of those big issues. New technology, by the way, has been deployed on the US-Canada border, but then again, the US-bound migrants, that's a big worry for Justin Trudeau. Modest checks for taxpayers, a tax holiday. Are these real problems for an unpopular prime minister at this point in time?
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a very interesting matrix, I'll say, which is playing out. In some oblique way, this could help Trudeau with Trump. Freeland, the deputy prime minister, She was known as a Trump baiter. She used to call him a bully in his first term. And even now, she is saying that, what we are facing in Canada is a major threat of economic nationalism from the United States. We should be preparing for it. And what she's blaming Trudeau is that Trudeau, in order to shore up his domestic popularity or whichever his position, he's pushing for a $250 Canadian, check to a certain segment of the population towards the cost of living crisis, and also is pushing for a sales tax holiday for 2 months for the festivals. He's trying to do that to shore up his own popularity within the domestic, constituency. But what she is saying, Freeland, she's saying that these are mere gimmicks. Yes, she's right actually on that. She's saying these are mere gimmicks and we should keep our powder dry. We should conserve our money because we are going to face an onslaught from Trump. Now, that's the domestic part. On the international or with the US, Trump has tweeted, I think, today or something or just now. He says,
Mr. Sachdev, he says he's a governor whose time has come crashing, and he also takes a jibe at Miss Freeland as well. Says that she didn't step down, she was in fact fired. But then again, somebody like Justin Trudeau is not in Donald Trump's good books either.
No, he could be. You see, if Trump is unhappy with Freeland and Freeland goes, that leaves Trudeau with some less baggage. He can play around, he can manage. What she is protesting is that also Trudeau agreed to spend about $1 billion on the Canadian border, as you were talking about, to prevent the smuggling of fentanyl drugs and illegal immigrants. So Trudeau is allocating about $1 billion towards that. So Trudeau could smarten up his game and cozy up to Trump. Whereas earlier he had, obviously, he's a progressive and
that's again an interesting point that you've made, over here. But given the fragility of his position, you've got NDP calling for Trudeau's resignation as well. He's got so many rebel members of parliament, 60 of them clearly, out in the open calling for his ouster. Do you think with the fragility of his position, he should be rummaging the chess pieces as much? He should be playing around, like you say?
Yeah, we don't know, but apparently from what I understand, Trudeau can continue. There is no provision within the Liberal Party to replace or change him. So he can continue to be the Prime Minister. The only thing which could, bring him down is a vote of quote-unquote, let's say, no confidence on a financial budget. Okay? Or a budget from our Indian context, as we were to say. So the litmus test would be that if Trudeau brings a financial budget to the floor of the parliament and he loses the majority, he does not. Wherein, you see, Jagmeet Singh, by the way, the NDP party which has been supporting Trudeau from the outside, he has also today called for Trudeau.
We have his reaction. Would you mind if I interject here and play his reaction, and we'll come back to you for more?
Please.
Let's do that.
Today, I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go. Right now, Canadians are struggling with the cost of living. I hear it everywhere I go. People cannot find a home that they can afford. They can't buy their groceries. And on top of that, we have Trump threatening tariffs at 25%, which put hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs at risk. And instead of focusing on these issues, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are focused on themselves. They're fighting themselves instead of fighting for Canadians. And for that reason, today I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
Mr. Sachdev, please complete your thoughts. Help the viewers really understand what's happening in Canada and what can we expect out of Canada. All of this happening ahead of polls with an unpopular Prime Minister.
Sure. See, Jagmeet Singh is calling for Trudeau to resign, but he is not saying that he'll vote against the Trudeau government when it comes to the budget. So far, he has not said that. He's saying Trudeau should resign, which is something very different than him committing that my bloc of MPs will vote against the Trudeau government and we will make him resign. There's enough gap out there. It's a very complex and a very strange kind of a situation. What I would say is that the resignation of the Deputy Prime Minister Freeland is the first casualty of Trump's tariff wars.
Right then, I think Mr. Sachdev, it's going to be very interesting to see because, you know, now that you're speaking about the financial and the budget issue, I'm reminded about what happened in France just a couple of days back with Bernier as well. And that was a budget dispute as well with the ouster of that prime minister. Is this Canadian Parliament heading the same way? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. But needless to say, he is being pressurized. He is feeling the wrath of those, Trump tariffs. And he's trying to, well, like you say, placate maybe the president-elect and his own rebel members of parliament as well. Rabindra Sachdev, we're going to leave it there. Foreign affairs expert with a keen focus on Canada and US. Many thanks for joining us on this broadcast. We were talking about the new technology that has been deployed on the border points because Canada is struggling to control the US-bound migrant crossings across the world's largest border. And despite installing this new technology that we've been trying to speak of to try to stop the flow, advocates are now warning restrictions could put migrants in greater danger. Here's a report. Take a look.
To stop vehicles bearing migrants from barreling across the Canadian border into the United States, blocks like these have been installed on rural roads that intersect the border. But Royal Canadian Mounted Police Sergeant Daniel Dubois explains they aren't a fail-safe solution.
People can still hop over them.
Managing the world's longest land border at about 4,000 miles is a tough job, but it's also one now in the spotlight after US President-elect Donald Trump threatened Canada and Mexico with sweeping 25% tariffs if they do not reduce the movement of migrants and drugs into the US. Canadian police say that over the past 4 years they've been installing cameras and sensors along this section over the border.
But for us, we typically will not arrest a migrant.
But officials like Charles Poirier acknowledge they are limited in what they can do to stop southbound migrants who are typically in Canada legally.
Well, here's the thing. They haven't committed an offense until they've crossed into the United States. So our focus for the past few months, and actually the past year and a half, has been on arresting and prosecuting the smugglers.
4 migration experts Reuters spoke with were unsure how new border security technology and equipment would prevent crossings. Canadian politicians admit the show of border strength is about creating an impression of security.
Push people to cross through...
And refugee advocates like Carlos Rojas Salazar argue the restrictions do not deter migrants.
When you try to cross a border, the only thing that you do is that you are pushing people to risk it. And you are increasing the royalties that organized crime are getting.
Most migrants at the border are heading from Canada to the US and not the other way around. Canadian authorities caught 1,000 people trying to cross into Canada between formal crossings in the 12 months ending in October, according to data obtained by Reuters. That's compared to more than 23,000 apprehended on the US side by US Customs and Border Patrol. That also represents a tiny fraction of the 1.5 million apprehensions over the same period near the US-Mexico border. American Terry Rowe lives on the New York side of the border. He says his motion-sensing cameras regularly film migrants crossing the border on foot, mostly towards the US.
It makes us a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know, when it's 70 feet from your bedroom window. I mean, we keep our doors locked.
But recently, he has noticed more heading north towards Canadian soil. Canadian law enforcement are also bracing for a potential influx of migrants fleeing Trump's threat to carry out mass deportations once he is in the White House. They say they have redeployed officers across the border to try prevent a surge.
Fear might drive some people into fleeing the United States and coming to Canada, hoping for a better future. So we had to be ready, and we are ready.
Well, time for us to slip into a quick commercial breather here. But on the other side, we're going to take you to Vanuatu, where a 7.4 magnitude earthquake has completely shaken the residents on that small island. It's close to Australia. Australia says it's our friend. They're doing all they can to help the relief efforts. Right on the other side, stick around with Global Lens.
One look and I'm falling for you like crazy, crazy. Boom, boom. Every heartbeat is only for you. Every breath, every moment with you. My heart goes boom, boom.
Unlimited Love XEV9e Mahindra Electric Origin SUVs.
Challenge is part of business.
Success to me means achieving a lot with limited resources.
It is the idea of bringing the best of East and West together.
We made history for a reason tonight.
Will it change the shape of American foreign policy? Violence has erupted in Manipur once again. How can we pass judgment, sir, before any inquiry that, they were volunteers or militants, sir?
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9. A 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck Vanuatu's capital port Villa, damaging buildings and cars with at least one person reportedly killed. The earthquake caused significant damage to buildings and vehicles. Footage from Vanuatu's state broadcaster, VBTC, revealed vehicles crushed under a collapsed building on the street lined up with shops. Additional footage showed buckled windows and collapsed concrete pillars in a building that houses foreign embassies, including those of the United States, Britain, France and New Zealand. Earlier in the day, the US tsunami warning system issued and later cancelled a tsunami warning for Vanuatu following the 7.4 magnitude earthquake. We've got security camera footage as well, capturing the moment the earthquake struck, showing the interior of a garage where tools and furniture were flung across the room. The drone footage also revealed multiple landslides, with debris blocking parts of a road near the international shipping terminal, where at least one container appeared to have been toppled over. Eyewitness videos showed items, shelves and store signs scattered across the floor of a pharmacy as well. But even as rescue efforts continue, a mass casualty triage has been set up at a hospital in Port Vila. A Vanuatu resident described the earthquake as the most violent he has ever experienced.
was the most violent earthquake I've experienced in my 21 years living in Vanuatu and in the Pacific Islands. I've seen a lot of large earthquakes, never one like this. My wife, who was born in Vanuatu, said it was the worst that she'd experienced in her life. The damage that we've seen in the capital is more extensive than any I've seen in previous earthquakes. I went by Villa Central Hospital shortly after the earthquake happened, maybe about 45 minutes afterwards. Spoke to police who were stationed at the gate there. They confirmed that there was one fatality. There were numerous wounded individuals visible at a triage center outside the emergency ward. I also saw a number of people that you'd qualify with minor injuries, basically. I guess you'd call them walking wounded. There's been no panic. There's a high degree of professionalism among the emergency responders. They're very calm. They're very focused. They're working very hard. They're mobilizing resources even as we speak.
Meanwhile, Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong expressed solidarity with Vanuatu. They said they are close friends and family.
On behalf of Australians, I want to extend our solidarity and our condolences to the people of Vanuatu. We've seen a dreadful tragedy at Port Vila. I want to say that we have reached out to my counterpart by message to offer any support that Vanuatu needs. We've also reached out through our High Commissioner. We will provide whatever assistance is required. I say to the people of Vanuatu, you are family and Australia is here to help. I don't have any information about Australians who are injured. Obviously, in Vanuatu there are Australians inevitably who either work there or are on holiday there. And that's why I've said to people, please contact the Consular Emergency Centre if you're in need of assistance.
Meanwhile, just yesterday, we've got Cyclone Chido that ripped across the archipelago between Mozambique and Madagascar, Mayotte, a French overseas territory, where emergency workers raced even today to find survivors and restore services to the French overseas territory, where hundreds or even thousands are feared dead from the worst cyclone to hit the Indian Ocean islands.
Emergency workers were searching for survivors in the French overseas territory Mayotte on Monday, where hundreds or maybe thousands are feared dead. That's after Cyclone Chido devastated large parts of the Indian Ocean islands over the weekend. It is the worst cyclone to hit the archipelago, located off the east coast of Africa, in nearly a century. The aftermath of the cyclone saw hillsides littered with the wreckage of hundreds of makeshift homes. The full extent of casualties and physical damage remains unclear. On Monday, maritime and aerial operations were underway to deliver relief supplies and equipment, French authorities said. Despite these efforts, significant challenges remain. Parts of the islands were still inaccessible to rescue workers on Monday, according to a civil security spokesperson. Mayotte, which lies between Mozambique and Madagascar, is made up of two main islands and has a population of about 321,000. It is significantly poorer than the rest of France and has grappled with gang violence and social unrest for decades. Extreme weather events have become more common around the globe, in keeping with global warming. And poorer nations often say they are bearing the brunt of the environmental crisis.
Moving on, a 15-year-old girl opened fire in a Wisconsin school classroom on Monday, fatally shooting a fellow student and a teacher and wounding 6 others before killing herself with that particular handgun. Here's a complete report. Take a look.
Police say a 15-year-old girl opened fire in a Wisconsin school classroom on Monday, fatally shooting a fellow student and a teacher and wounding 6 other people before killing herself with the handgun. As of late Monday, Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes said the motive for the violence remained unclear.
At this time, we're still working on a motive, trying to determine why this happened.
Barnes added that 2 students remained in critical condition with life-threatening injuries. Police have identified the shooter as Natalie Rupnow, a student at the Abundant Life Christian School who also went by the name Samantha. The school has 420 students from pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. Officials said Rupnau arrived at school on time and pulled out the handgun about 3 hours into the school day. Barnes said a second-grade student, who would generally be 7 or 8 years old, called 911 to report the shooting. There have been 322 school shootings in the United States this year, according to the K-12 school shooting database website. That is the second highest total of any year since 1966, according to that database, topped only by last year's total of 349 such shootings. Studies show that only 3% of all U.S. mass shootings are perpetuated by females, making Monday's shooting unusual. Barnes said the shooter's parents were cooperating with the investigation, but the police were not pressing them too hard as they had just lost a daughter. When asked how she got the gun, Barnes said, quote, "Good question. How does any 15-year-old get a hold of a gun?"
Well, an interesting tech story that's coming your way next. The Democratic Republic of Congo has filed a criminal complaints against Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium, accusing the tech firm of using conflict minerals in its supply chain. Take a look.
The Democratic Republic of Congo sued Apple in France and Belgium Monday. It accused the firm of being complicit in the conflict minerals trade. Congo in Central Africa is a major source of tin, tantalum, and tungsten, the so-called 3T minerals used in computers and mobile phones. But some independent mines are run by armed groups. The UN says they've been involved in massacres of civilians, mass rapes, and other crimes. Lawyers for the state of Congo argue Apple uses minerals pillaged from Congo and laundered through international supply chains, which renders Apple complicit in crimes. The tech giant says it audits suppliers, publishes findings, and funds bodies that seek to improve mineral traceability. Its 2023 filing on conflict minerals to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission said none of the smelters or refiners of 3T minerals in its supply chain had financed or benefited armed groups in Congo or neighboring countries. Now, these are thought to be the Congolese state's first criminal complaints against a major tech company. The allegations ranging from covering up war crimes to the laundering of tainted minerals and deceptive commercial practices don't only target Apple's European subsidiaries, but the group as a whole. Central to Congo's complaints are its criticisms of a metals industry-funded monitoring and certification scheme, ITSCI, which helps companies like Apple perform due diligence on suppliers of 3T minerals from African countries. Lawyers say Apple has been using it as a fig leaf to falsely present its supply chain as clean.
But shifting our focus to Syria next, because after the ouster of Bashar al-Assad, he made that first public statement on social media saying that his ouster and him leaving and fleeing Syria and Damascus wasn't premeditated, but it was because of the insurgents that were making their way to Damascus. But now the Western nations are scrambling for any kind of influence in Syria. Take a look at this. German and French officials are set to meet Syria's new governing authorities in Damascus following a late-night meeting between British diplomats and interim leader Ahmad al-Shara on Monday as well. And 9 days after Bashar al-Assad's ouster, Western nations are cautiously engaging with the new administration led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the HTS, an Islamist group still designated a terrorist organization by many countries. Now, Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Golani, the leader of the HTS, stressed the importance of restoring ties, lifting sanctions, and facilitating the return of Syrian refugees during his meeting with British officials, according to Syrian state news agency as well. But photos from the meeting showed Shara in formal attire, marking his highest level engagement with Western officials since HTS took over. German diplomats, meanwhile, will also hold talks today focusing on Syria's transitional process and minority protection. The German Foreign Ministry acknowledged HTS's controversial past but noted the group's prudent conduct since assuming power. France, meanwhile, is expected to join these discussions later today, signaling growing Western interest in Syria's new leadership. And let's not discount the United States that has confirmed multiple communications with the HTS over the past week, whilst EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas suggested sanctions relief could be possible if Syria's new leadership shows progress on inclusivity and minority rights. Syria's own Prime Minister, the interim caretaker, Mohammed al-Bashir, has pledged to remain in office until March 1st as the country seeks to rebuild after over 5 decades of Assad family rule and nearly 14 years of civil war. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Global Lens. But then again, once we're talking about West Asia, we've got a Saudi female pop rock band that has released their first album. The band has been named Syria. It's formed of 6 Saudi women who gained fame with their unique style of performance, mixing different influences and music genres. We're going to leave you with this report. Many thanks for watching.
It's very exciting for us to be able to shed light on this genre. I think there's a lot of misconception around rock music, and a lot of times people don't understand it's just about, you know, screaming, letting out some energy. I mean, we all do that at home sometimes, so why not put that forward and embrace that side? And we're just looking forward to, you know, encourage Saudi women to just express themselves in any form that they find suitable for their character, for their style.
Performing in Saudi Arabia, I feel like a total badass. Kind of like people are very interested and intrigued, and it's still unique to an extent. So yeah, it's always like, wow, I can't believe you're actually doing this. You know, it's cool.
Unlimit Love. B6 Mahindra Electric Origin SUVs.
Considered a wonderful product when it was invented. It solved many problems of human lives. We are talking about plastic.
Did you know the plastic in your house is as old as the oldest person in your family?
India almost produces somewhere around 9.3 million metric tons of plastic every year.
It is not dissolving, it is not evaporating, it is not vanishing from sight, it is just breaking down into our soil and ocean. So plastic is just going to be there.
So we need to go back to the questions, we need to go back to the start. When did water bottles come to our consciousness? Why was it marketed like that?
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Challenge is part of business.
Success to me means achieving a lot with limited resources.
It is the idea of bringing the best of East and West together.
Hello and welcome to News 9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News 9 Plus. Here's a look at the top headlines today. Union Law Minister Arjun Ram Mengwal on Tuesday tabled the constitutional